Someone with half your IQ is making 10 times as you because they weren't smart enough to doubt themselves.
If you can go from arbitrary language to arbitrary digital command, imagine that each and every human on the planet has their own programmer that actually does what they want, as opposed to the programmers that work for me who don't do what I ask. Right.
To tie it back for founders, like I think you've just got to be totally across every aspect of your business, and you've got to be on the cutting edge of things that are developing. So don't take a narrow mindset and be in the camp of website and SEO is the only way forward. Like, be open-minded to experiment with other things. Otherwise you will be left behind.
Resilience is not a trait. It is the process of positive adaptation. And I think that's powerful. And I know that resilience broadly is quite often thrown around too much in everyday life, but it really hit home it's a process, and that it's how you adapt and how you look at the world.
Well, my computer is still doing a reboot, so I'm going to have to start from the telephone, which, if you recall, the last time I did it from a telephone was in Fiji, where it was well past cocktail hour, and luckily there was a problem with the phone recording, and that never saw the light of day.
James, I want to see the bulbs.
Yeah, that was little Louis with Anna, so next time.
How's the house going, Jack?
It's going good. We've got the plaster going in, like the plaster's half done. And then, once the plastering, the flushing's done, and then we just got to paint.
Yeah.
And then I got my mate to do the flooring, so that'll be another day. But yeah, I'm so ready for this to be over. Fuck. I'm just so sick of unreliable tradies.
Unreliable tradies. Is there any other kind?
I introduced him to a reliable tradie.
No, yeah. Ash introduced me to the most reliable, like best tradie I've had so far as a referral from Ash. The problem is, like, all these traders I'm using, they're my mates, but it's like, you guys are pissing me off because you're half finishing your job, you're fucking off and want to come back on the weekend. And like, it's just taking the piss. And it's like, do you guys realize, like, there's kids at home, I'm staying at the in-laws, I need this done.
Yeah.
Don, where are you at the moment?
Morton Island.
Oh, cool.
Down at Coringal. Libby's aunt and uncle have a place down here, and then we've rented a place. Well, given this is the first episode back and talking with a couple of people, I thought, why don't we do a few predictions and then record them down, and at the end of the year, demonstrate how incompetent and wrong we were.
I predict that all predictions will be wrong. Well, who's going to kick off then? I feel like...
Well, given that prediction, Aaron, off you go.
Oh, okay. Well, did you guys see David Swan's predictions for 25 that he wrote?
Yeah, and then Elon had a crack at him?
Yeah. Elon Potter. So one of his predictions was that Elon Musk wouldn't be running Tesla anymore because he'd be called into all the stuff that Trump wants him to do. But I actually disagree. I think, being the egotistical maniac that he is, of course he will keep running everything and believing that he can. So
unless the house of cards does start to fall, it is a pretty bloody good excuse, and a pretty easy one, that actually a higher calling from the president is there and you get a beautiful exit under the cover of darkness.
There is that.
Wait, Don, can we, is there a prediction here?
No.
You have to do a prediction on Elon. Like, you can't not do a 2025 prediction without saying Elon.
Okay. All right. Well, then when I get to my turn.
Obviously, the rise of AI, I think it will be the year of the AI agent. We've talked about that before. I do think, like, it was interesting spending the summer in country pubs in New South Wales and stuff, and just reminding myself of how far removed from the world that we live in most of the population actually is. But I do think 2025 will be the year that AI starts being talked about in country pubs in Australia, because I think it will be that much adopted. Also, like we've been talking about, I think it will be the year of more hardware and robotics being funded and becoming a focus more so. I think there'll be a shift of capital from SaaS into hardware and IoT, like we've been doing.
Well, I don't even need to go. You just covered off all mine.
Oh, did I really?
We're good.
Doesn't work like that, Ash.
Well, I'll piggyback, since we're pretty much in alignment, Aaron. I think there will be some very bad incidences and scandals where AI agents are at the root cause. But I also think that it will change some people's lives. And I think we'll see it not just in business, but in all walks of life, where I can see, just from conversations over the holidays, in particular, talking to parents, that it's the year when parents will actually start to think about how they can not only use this in their job, but training AI agents to help the kids with their homework. But you'll also have kids building their own agents to teach them about things that they're interested in and aren't learning in school, or things they have trouble with. So I think we'll actually see the AI agent go way beyond the business ecosystem. We're going to have a year of more political unrest. I think we'll have definitely some more terrorism, unfortunately. And yeah, I'm not even going to mention Trump or Elon. I'm out.
Yeah, leave that for Don. But yeah, following on like the AI theme, I think we're going to transition from text to prompt to text to action. And we're going to speak about that in a video later on. But I think using agents will become more normal, and that's going to cause us to rethink the pricing model of software. So traditionally, we've always done the recurring. And I don't know what's going to win. Like ultimately, the market's going to decide what the new pricing model will be. But I think it's either going to be usage or outcome based. But ultimately, the market will work that self out. And because agents are going to reduce the cost of writing code, I think there's going to be way more competitors going to enter the market, and the size of teams won't look like what they previously have. And there was the quote there that we spoke about last year from CBA. The dev team had become 30% more efficient. So I think, like, to throw a prediction this year, we're only going to go like step forward. So it's going to be 2 to 3x more efficient, and it won't just apply to dev teams. I think it's going to be like employees across the whole organization. So I think particularly when we look at like a service-based business, one with a lot of administrative tasks, like they're going to become dramatically more efficient. And like something to remember is the LLMs are the worst they are today. So we are capped at, let's say, a 2 to 3 this year, but it's only going to keep getting better and better. And we're going to become more and more efficient. And then the other prediction I have, because the cost of writing code's going down, more competitors are going to enter the market. Where a market traditionally has probably been too small because of the TAM, I think these markets are going to be ripe to be disrupted by these indie hackers, where it's like a small team of 1 to 2 people. An example I could give here is like a CRM or a safety tool for playgrounds in Australia. And let's say that's a sub 50 mil, could even be sub 15. And for a cost base of 1 to 2 people, that's actually a really good market, but it's like traditionally ruled out. So why would anyone like bother writing? But when you take into consideration the time to write code's gone down so much, and then now you're just looking at like, is the odds of success? So you're really just looking at, are there any competitors in the market? And there isn't. So why wouldn't you attack it and try and get this like cash flowing business that you have such a good return on? And then the other one I think is any businesses that are relying as like code as their moat, I think they're at risk. So I think we might see 1 to 2 big logos fall, which for the last 20 years of like something we've all paid a subscription for and we thought it's such a great business. I don't know which company that is, but I just think we're going to see these businesses that actually don't have a competitive advantage. They're just going to be at risk.
That one around the small teams tackling like small town. I think you're spot on there. I really like that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is probably a little slightly weird, but I've been watching my kids more recently as they like just watch the world and learn and trial and error. And I just look at them and they are little AIs that are being trained on voice and visual, and you see them updating in real life. And that's given me a bit more weird confidence that as long as we can feed enough data in, I think AGI, given how stupid humans generally are, is in fact something possible. And therefore that like it's not going to take much more to move to that agent to action, the text to action, the visual to action. I think the next port of call is really going to be feeding video. Like everything I've seen is we've just run out of text. But when I look at my kids, a 1-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, etc., they're just using video and then experiences to train themselves based on the outcomes that the parents are setting for them, whether it's behavior or whatever it might be. And I can just see that. I've just got more confidence that actually with enough power and enough compute, we're going to be able to solve some of that. Getting a bit more local orientated, I also think that interest rates, which do affect us quite a bit, and our founders are going to stay higher for longer. Like there's just a lot in the system that I don't think we're going to get this big fall that the futures market is playing out. The people that are truly early stage and venture type people, I can see a resurgence of them coming back this year. I think there's been some really good noises around some of the M&A activity that started to occur. We've had a couple of years of lulls, and I'm really just some of the engagements that we've had in this first bit of the year tells me that there's going to be a bit of money come back.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it'll be slightly easier to raise capital this year than last year.
for good businesses with the right dynamics. I think that the old school businesses that are still got the hangover from COVID that haven't delivered the numbers, I think we're going to see a continued failure rate because those stories are just old. And unless you've got something new that demonstrates that you're going to survive and thrive, you're in trouble. In terms of Elon, rate of change, which is the second derivative, is one of the most powerful things in the universe that we live in. And a body in motion tends to stay in motion. Now, despite what idiots like me have said and others have said about the demand for Teslas, somehow they've been able to always stoke demand and get a rate of change on an increasing basis quarter on quarter for sales and deliveries. Well, that's fallen. And with so much more competition, with Elon fucking the brand and a whole lot of other things, if the rate of change continues to go negative, when you've got a high cost-based business like manufacturing and the R&D and all the other aspects, once you start not being able to grow your output, a business gets into a whole lot of trouble. Now, Elon's got Starlink and all sorts of other bits and pieces. And what we do know is once something isn't doing what we want it to do, entrepreneurs tend to leave the baby on the side of the road and blame other people. I do think that this could be by the end of the year, if not early 26, the year that Elon leaves the baby on the side of the road, especially given his package continues to get vetoed by the courts. So that previous big package, they still haven't found a way to do it. So is that enough, Jack?
Yeah, no, that was good, Don. And then I've got one more for Ash and Aaron. How many times do we think Don will forget tip record?
How dare you stop also and important questions.
Do we do it on a percentage basis? Roughly 50 weeks of episodes? I would say 15%.
But at a certain point, you've got to take responsibility for yourselves. And if you're going to give a monkey a gun, it's going to be very dangerous. Like,
yes.
well, do we get into something functional? Let's kick off with just a couple of recaps. So last year, there'd been quite a bit of conversation around Employment Hero in Capital Brief, reporting by Bronwyn Clune. We also had Ben on that did an episode with us where we went into some of those conversations as well. But just before the year ended, an article in the AFR came out that said unicorn tech firm spent $43 million to buy its founder's other company. When you read a heading like that, what does it conjure? What's occurred here?
I feel like you're looking for us to make a very specific statement now, Don.
No, I'm just asking you. Well, for me, the word spent. The article indicates that 43 million spent is a cash kind of thing, but actually I think it's less than 3 million in cash. The rest of it was all equity. And part of that equity is actually tied up based on different performance metrics. And so when you go through the article, I think it's just important to understand that there are different ways to acquire. Now, if a founder's asset was being bought all in cash, like that's very different to being exchanged for shares in my view, or maybe not. Maybe I'm naive there. What are your thoughts?
No, when you shared that bit when we were talking the other day, these things, like they almost never look good, right? Like these types of transactions. And even though Ben describes it as being the valuation being determined at arm's length, like it's a really difficult thing to communicate without someone saying something at some point, because it does have that lens to it. But I don't know if you saw as well, Simon Thompson put out an article just this morning, about an hour ago, saying that Employment Hero has also spent another 112 million acquiring a Canadian company for expansion into Canada. And then Simon actually talks a lot about this other article and this transaction as well. And the between the lines kind of commentary around it was that, you know, they've already acquired one for 43 million. Now they're acquiring another. But again, just the lens of the nuance of, well, this is a different market. It's a different play.
And a different product.
Yeah.
The AFR reported it as well as Capital Brief. In the AFR, they said that it was the largest acquisition that they've done, but that is actually wrong. It's not their biggest. The biggest they've done is actually KeyPay. So that's incorrect. Now, being private companies, it means that all of that information sits in their accounts and gets essentially released once a year. The key thing, especially with the acquisition of the $43 million one, in order to do that transaction, all the shareholders essentially had to agree, because they're issuing quite a lot of shares. It's just often these related party transactions are just hard to color right. Now, there's a newsletter, Overnight Success. I don't know if you guys have seen it or follow it. In their newsletter, talking about the transaction, it said, in a similar vein to Mineral Res, so MinRes. Now, the founder of MinRes was effectively caught in an ATO scheme, was also caught to have done transactions with the company that wasn't disclosed to shareholders. Like, it has been a big thing of some really bad behavior. So they then say, in a similar vein, MinRes, the ASX listed miner, has recently come under fire for a failure to disclose related party transactions where the executives were able to enrich themselves through the transaction. So in talking about this transaction, they've paired it to what MinRes have done, which is just not right. Now, I reached out to Will asking for some clarification on how it was that you could try and connect the two transactions. And to his credit, he came back and said that they're a small team, a mistake was made. I can have a little bit of empathy that if you read a headline that the unicorn spent 43 million to buy a company from its founder, and you don't then read the accounts and you don't understand the transaction and then all the MinRes stuff, and your brain just goes founder, related party. But in MinRes, there was the big issue was that there wasn't shareholder approval or disclosure.
Yeah.
Whereas here, they're a private company. They don't have to make an announcement every time there's a bloody transaction. And so I think it's just important that everybody, before pulling the trigger on any information now, Employment Hero has had a range of reporting out of Capital Brief that it doesn't agree with, but you should be looking at every situation on its own merits. And because there's reporting in one area and the company's under pressure, doesn't make it right to then connect it to somebody else that's doing the wrong thing.
Yeah. And when I saw this, I just completely dismissed the headline. I think also, having spent time with Ben on our podcast, it was really clear that he's happy to talk about these issues and areas of concern. And so for me, it was, okay, well, where can I learn more? How can I understand this at a different level? And Don, once you were able to get the information around bit of cash, equity, then it seems to make a lot more sense. So I think it's just a good reminder that there's a lot of clickbait in headlines. And
we can't comment on whether 43 million, even in shares, is a good price or not, because often if you have a look at, even when we invest in companies, none of them have ever made a cent. A lot of acquisitions are strategic. Now, the less cash being paid, the more equity, because it's high risk, tends to get paid, and vice versa. And there's if it was an all cash transaction, I have a feeling, it may not even be done, because a lot of shareholders would say, well, hang on a minute, I don't want resources from this business going over to there. In this instance here, from my reading of the accounts, less cash went out than what actually was in the company that was being acquired. And so then you have alignment. You have, 2.5% or less than 2.5%. If it's got some strategic benefit, like Canva with Leonardo AI, what they forked out 1% in order to take over Leonardo. There was a whole lot of people in the media that talked about it was faltering and wasn't living up to its hype and whatever else. But if you're Canva and you're able to put a 1% towards owning your own tech, those were my thoughts on it.
I think you're spot on.
Now, slightly recapping and coming back to the AI conversations that we've been having, this little video. So this is Eric Schmidt, former CEO of Google. And I thought this would be a good one to share and play, especially coming into this year, because he got me thinking just a little bit more as well.
In the next year, you're going to see very large context windows, agents, and text to action. When they are delivered at scale, it's going to have an impact on the world at a scale that no one understands yet. Much bigger than the horrific impact we've had by social media, right, in my view. So here's why. In a context window, you can basically use that as short-term memory. And I was shocked that context windows get this long. The technical reasons have to do with the fact that it's hard to serve, hard to calculate, and so forth. The interesting thing about short-term memory is when you ask it a question, read 20 books, you give it the text of the books is the query, and you say, tell me what they say, it forgets the middle, which is exactly how human brains work too, right? That's where we are. with respect to agents, there are people who are now building essentially LLM agents. And the way they do it is they read something like chemistry, they discover the principles of chemistry, and then they test it. And then they add that back into their understanding, right? That's extremely powerful. And then the third thing, as I mentioned, is text to action. So I'll give you an example. The government is in the process of trying to ban TikTok. We'll see if that actually happens. If TikTok is banned, here's what I propose each and every one of you do. Say to your LLM the following: make me a copy of TikTok, steal all the users, steal all the music, put my preferences in it, produce this program in the next 30 seconds, release it, and in 1 hour, if it's not viral, do something different along the same lines. That's the command. Boom, 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 right? You understand how powerful that is. If you can go from arbitrary language to arbitrary digital command, which is essentially what Python in this scenario is, imagine that each and every human on the planet has their own programmer that actually does what they want, as opposed to the programmers that work for me who don't do what I ask, right? The programmers here know what I'm talking about. So imagine a non-arrogant programmer that actually does what you want, and you don't have to pay all that money to. And there's infinite supply of these programs.
And this is all within the next year or two.
Very soon. Those three things, and I'm quite convinced it's the union of those three things that will happen in the next wave.
It's the union of those three things, which I think comes back to some of our earlier predictions. It makes total sense, and it's scary as hell.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, this is in line with what the conversation with Joel from Anthropic went through, and I can see it. Like that fundamental shift will happen fast. I think as soon as we have the text to agent model, that adoption curve will be phenomenal.
I thought we should get Duncan on to dive into those three in a little bit more detail and maybe do like a separate potty on it, Don.
It's so exciting, but it's also so scary.
Yeah, we're supposed to be choosing generationally survivable businesses out of this.
Yeah. But yeah, something that was touched on there is like how AI doesn't care what model it uses or what is the mode. Like it doesn't care if it has to do 10,000 tabs because it can go so much faster than a human. And it's actually hard to comprehend that. But then when you speak to Joel and they say they've actually had to slow the model down so humans can digest what it's actually doing. When you appreciate that, it's just like, wow, that is super scary. Oh, it's just like, it's crazy.
So I shared it with you, but over the holidays, a few things jumped into my mind, and I like to write and share some things, and I put it into ChatGPT just to do spell checking, grammar, that kind of thing. But then it came to my mind, like, why not get a critique? So I asked it some questions like, can you give me some feedback? And it gave me some good kind of stuff. And then I thought, well, could you write me a review? This blog is an overlong, self-indulgent attempt to justify the writer's personal reflections, riddled with oversimplifications, stereotypes, and anecdotal theories masquerading as insights. The tone is condescending, the claim lacks factual grounding, and the structure meanders with repetitive points and unnecessary links, making it exhausting to read and alienating for anyone seeking balanced and meaningful advice.
When you shared that, I was like, this is what AI is going to say about all human writing.
But when I saw the factual findings, I thought of what Libby said to you, Don. Like, you just put these things out and nothing fact check. It's like, yeah.
So what I didn't share with you, I said, ouch, that's harsh. Could you try something a bit more positive? So what it said, this blog is refreshingly honest and introspective. I can't even read, hang on. By exploring themes of communication and the blah, blah, blah. So I tried to find some middle ground so I didn't go to bed crying.
I love that even AI is giving you attitude.
It's actually quite good though, because so what I then said to it is, which are the bits that are condescending? And what's really interesting, I was describing some things that I see as a common pattern people get wrong. It's interesting that the AI's view of condescending was anything that I was pointing out that people do wrong. So that was really interesting.
Yeah.
And then on the repetitive nature, I went back to and I said, please show me all the bits that are repetitive. And technically they're correct. It is repeating, but it's taking a different nuance each time of the pattern. So it's almost like the AI's model is trained on, like, if you point out one thing once, it applies to everything. But the nuance with some of the stuff we do internally and culturally, and especially around relationships between co-founders and others, is that, like, it's not black and white, it's shades of gray. And so it was interesting to then dive into that. And then on some of the third bits of lacking, well, what was the statement? Lacking fact. Well, yeah, on some of the patterns that we've seen and that we work on, the things that I don't think many other people see, and they're not stuff that have journals of writing. And that almost excited me a little bit, because in a world of AI, only those with original thought and something that actually connects to what other humans may have felt but had no other way of explaining. Like, surely that's the only way to differentiate yourself, because if the AI is already summarizing everything that everyone thinks and already has, then how do you differentiate? So anyway, it was good to have it as a co-pilot, but still, fuck you, ChatGPT. I did read it to Libby, and she was like, wow, it knows exactly who you are. I was like, thank you, darling.
Oh, that's too good.
Another thing that Aaron and I had briefly touched on in I think the last episode, but something that I've been really reflecting on is, yeah, all of our websites are built for humans using their eyes and their brains to find and digest information. But actually, in an agentic world, and I think we're starting to see it now, the little agent that you're setting up to go and do it actually needs the information, not visual. It needs it in a totally different way. And there was a post by Iden Levin. He said, just 2 years since its launch, ChatGPT has captured 8% of the online search volume in the US. The once unshakable Google now faces an existential threat. This threat is just starting and is set to transform every internet interface as we know it. Users prefer agentic interfaces like chat and voice, which will completely change how we interact with e-commerce shops and online travel. Agents behave very differently from humans, as they don't care about flashy branding, logos, or visuals in general. They process and compare products across the internet with machine speed and precision. 3 decades and billions of dollars went into optimizing the user interface for the human eye, so you will click and buy more. These interfaces are now at risk as shopping agents and personal assistants are coming. We call it the great GUI overhaul. And I think that's dead right. A lot of the stuff that they've done and prioritized in the past is probably going to become irrelevant.
Look, I think it's right, but I don't think we're quite there yet. Like I still believe that, and it's not like our websites. Yes, they're trained to, well, they're built in a way that makes them attractive and easy to read for us as humans, but you still have to have a high SEO ranking for us to pay attention to you. So you were still doing things in the back end, which is somewhat analogous to what we're going to have to do in order to rank highly with a GPT search or a Claude search and our AI agent. So I do think there is some crossover between this, but
Don't you think that SEO will change to SAO? So it'll go from search engine to search agent.
I think we'll still have both for a while. Like, I still use Google because, and this is my own thesis of the fact that if I'm going to put a query into GPT versus Google, and I know that Google can give me the answer, I'm going to go to Google because it uses less energy. And I'm conscious about our energy usage as a species. So until we can get the amount of energy required to run a prompt on a LLM versus what it takes as an energy requirement to do a Google search, I will still use Google when I know it's a simple thing and I know Google can give me the answer quickly. That's a personal thing. The other point I wanted to make is that, yes, I have my AI agents trained to help me shop, but I still get a shortlist, and then as a human, I then go and validate from that shortlist what I want. So I still think that the billions of dollars put into good websites, good branding, aesthetic UX UI matters, and it will matter for some time until you've built a relationship and an ongoing understanding with your agent that they know you well enough and that your likes and dislikes as a human are consistent enough for your agent to know. Whereas if you think about the subconscious changes that we make as a human, quite often shopping habits of, I buy X yogurt. Well, actually, sometimes I go completely off the rails with what yogurt I want to buy. Like, how is your agent going to know that unless you're communicating that? But we don't normally communicate these things. And that's where I think branding's still going to play a big part of it, the way that you market to a consumer and to an agent, I think is where the first big shift is going to come.
I think, yeah, for me, what you're describing, Ash, is it's like the tech diffusion, like the adoption curve, and it's about trust. And to what Jack said before, Anthropic is throttling their kind of agent tool at the moment so that the human can see the visual representation of what it's doing so that we can build trust in it. And so I think this transition of, at the moment, it's going to be very much agent to human, because human still wants to go through the decision making exactly like you said. But once that trust is there, I think it will there'll be increasingly things that we set and forget. We set our agent to do. We don't need to supervise it because we trust it. So it'll be agent to agent. And then I think, and we've got a couple of things later, but the human computer interface, like you look at the technology there that's embedding with directly into our neural network, I think it'll end up agent interfacing direct in, and potentially we're subconsciously feeding our agent information. And so I do think it's a kind of typical adoption curve. It will take time, but humans are the slowest part of that process. And so I think, I see a world where websites just pretty much completely vanish, and GUI as we know it completely changes.
And I think like right now we're in this transition period where no one knows, the market doesn't know. So like to tie it back for founders, like I think you've just got to be totally across every aspect of your business, and you've got to be on the cutting edge of things that are developing. So don't take a narrow mindset and be in the camp of website and SEO is the only way forward. Like be open-minded to experiment with other things. Otherwise you will be left behind. And no one knows right now. Like wait until the market, but just be willing enough to experiment, take punts that aren't costly on your P&L. So then you can get feedback and actually see which is the best channel.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I was having a conversation with a founder for the break around, you need to understand how GPT, Claude, et cetera, rank. And they're not using Google, they're using Bing, or they're using another interface. And they all have slightly different ways of ranking search results that they're doing for you. And so if I was a founder, I would be looking to understand how can I optimize, whether it's website or just being able to be found, to your brand equity per se, across everything. To Jack's point, I think being on top of that and being agile and having someone in-house who is looking to grow and build in this growing ecosystem and ever changing, that's what I think is exciting.
Yeah, and as founder and CEO, or founders and the board, it's maintaining that culture and climate that can cross the street and chew gum at the same time, that can run the business day to day, but has enough energy, enough focus, enough resources to still look at the future. And what ends up happening with a lot of companies that get left behind is they don't know how to do those two things simultaneously. It becomes really hard because the day-to-day demands just kill, which is what we try and teach on the offsites, which is why we invite our portfolio, why we invite external companies and investors as well, because there are some tried and true ways, irrelevant of AI or irrelevant of any of the other things, to create a culture and a climate that can actually do those things simultaneously. And when's our next one, Aaron?
I was just looking up the dates exactly as you said that, because I've forgotten.
But yeah, it's a great couple of days together, a great spot, and it's really teaching those frameworks and tools. Now, another one, assume you haven't found the dates.
March 28th, the weekend of March 28th. Three days, 2 nights in northern New South Wales.
Yeah.
I was just going to add, it would be great, any listeners, if there are topics that they think would be interesting and they want to come to the offsite, to send them in, let us know so we can start thinking about how we can incorporate them into the curriculum.
Yeah.
It'd be really interesting to hear from people.
Yeah, it's always great getting the other founders and that have been there and getting other investors in the room to work through these things.
Yep.
Well, changing gears a little bit, given this is the first episode of the year, 2024 was a difficult year for a lot of people, for others not so much. And I think resilience is one of the biggest things that a founder and their team and their board need to foster within a company. And you find me resilient people, they're able to deal with the stuff that life throws at them. You find me resilient companies. Now, how you build a resilient company, that's a little bit different. But I found an article in the AFR, which I thought was actually good, which was 6 different ways to build resilience. And I'll put the link in there. That's by Lucy Dean. But she talks about things like composure, own self-worth, which is a big one, especially in founder circles, because as we've discussed a number of times, we think that impulses to be a founder in the first place come from a whole lot of challenges. And one of the common themes we often see is a reaction to low self-worth. Mastery is another one. Positivity, practicing positivity, achievement, and satisfaction. And then she goes on to talk about signs your resilience toolbox is lacking and lists out a number of things that we'll summarize in there. Did you get a chance to have a look at that?
This is my favorite article of the year. Nowhere early in, but you've got the trophy so far. I actually sent this to a bunch of people who it reminded me of or who are going through hard times. This is actually probably the best definition of resilience in my perspective that I've seen. So the author Gatt, or the researcher I should say, says that resilience is not a trait. It is the process of positive adaptation. And I think that's powerful. And I know that resilience broadly is quite often thrown around too much in everyday life, but it really hit home it's a process, and that it's how you adapt and how you look at the world. And I think there are some great takeaways in this article for founders, of course, but just really for people as well. And at the end of the article, I also thought there was some really interesting points around early signals of stress and burnout and how they're highly correlated to how you do each of these components of resilience. So I think it's a great article for people to read, specifically founders, but also C-suite and managers. So you can try to look at this in your team and also your friends and family around you. But yeah, loved it.
Yeah, really important stuff. And I think it is really an important area for founders to understand and to get into the nuances of what's different between grit, resilience, anti-fragility, like all these concepts. And the work of Angela Duckworth, Nassim Taylor, I think it's an important area for founders because it is such a critical ingredient of success. It was interesting last week as well, hanging out with my sister who's a GP, retrained to specialize in neuroplasticity. And she was talking about the reversal of things like dementia, Alzheimer's, like the grey matter in your brain and the cells and how that works, and the ability to actually improve your physical health through thought and through practices around your mental well-being. And it's absolutely phenomenal, the research that's being done now, and yeah, where that's heading, and also the role of diet and gut health increasingly becoming more prevalent. So I think for founders, these types of topics, often it's hard to justify them, or we get caught in this trap of, well, if I'm not working 100% on my business over here, or if I'm not doing this, or it's seen as indulgent maybe. But I actually think it's really critical to have some time at some point where you invest in understanding these concepts and actually putting them into practice. Anything on this one, Jack?
No, nothing on this one.
As your resilience?
Oh, being tested, put it that way.
Is this the point where I just remind listeners that prior to baby Louis arriving, and we were just having a bit of a supportive chat with Jack as the soon-to-be father, Jack said something like, look, to begin with, because Anna will be doing a lot of it, I don't think my life's going to change as much. And I think those were the words, were they not, Jack?
How's that playing out, Jack?
Yeah.
Oh, look, yeah, there's some truth in it. Like, my life definitely hasn't changed as much as Anna's, but God, it's changed.
Let me just type that comment into ChatGPT and ask for some feedback.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is exactly why we cover topics like this in the offsite in particular when we go away, and giving founders the opportunity to learn from each other about the techniques that they use and methods and frameworks that we recommend or we use ourselves. And equally on the missions too, we always end up, usually by the Thursday night of the mission, somewhere in the Airstream in a random pub in London or in the US, talking about exactly these sorts of things, because they often are the inhibitor to growth for founders. There's something there that's holding them back. And ultimately, it's leaving something on the table. So very important topics.
Yeah, and slightly related, but a little bit tangential. I'd seen a video online on LinkedIn that I'll just hit play on here that says, babies aren't afraid of snakes. And in my mind, what jumped in is like, why do first-time founders sometimes have an advantage is because they haven't yet experienced a whole range of negative things. Now, at the same time, experience has some benefits. Let's not say that it doesn't. But this video that I'll just play here for the YouTube listeners is a group of, I reckon they're 6-month-olds, and someone comes up and places carpet pythons.
Oh my God. Oh, is this okay? Don't touch it. Don't touch. No.
So those voices are the parents that are watching on via camera of their babies playing with these snakes. And I think it's true. And what also reminded me, the first part of the holidays was down in Ashby on the Clarence River. Now, all rivers have a few little things in them, like Noosa River, who I've been swimming in, 35 years, even in the afternoons, late at night. If you Google the size of the bull sharks that come out of Noosa River down there, they're huge. So the challenge is that over time, by the time I've gotten to my age, I'm exposed to so much stuff around bull sharks and shark attacks and whatever else. In the Clarence River, I was a little hesitant, but I want my kids to have the same life that I did. So those jump in, I've got to jump in as well, but I'm not comfortable. But they don't know what could be down there, and statistically the risk has to be low, doesn't it? And anyway, somehow I've linked that back to founders.
I had the exact same thing when we were away down in Sydney, where I grew up. Like, took the kids down there just to show them, and they all like jump in Middle Harbour, and I'm like, man, I swam down here every day as a kid. I never thought about bull sharks, but now I'm just absolutely freaking out watching the water in case there's a bloody bull shark in there.
So you didn't jump in?
I didn't, but that, in fairness, I had no swimmers, and there was a group of others around. I thought, no, I'm not just going down to my boxes and jumping in front of all these people.
Yeah, John, that video reminded me of the quote that you sent through that was on the whiteboard at EVP about there's always someone dumber than you that's like started. What's the exact quote? It's like,
I'll find it.
Oh, does anyone remember? It's like there's always someone dumber than you that started and is ahead of you or something.
Yeah, outperforming you or something.
Because they're too dumb to realize or something. It's something like that. Like, it's about fear.
It reminds me, though, when I was in Mongolia, and the local kids were climbing up this random structure, and all the Aussie mums ran over telling the kids to get down, and all the locals are like, why are you yelling at my kids? And like, we had this concept of fear, but they didn't. And then these little kids who were like 5 jump bareback on bloody thoroughbred, race across to go and herd some yaks. And it's like, oh, right. Yeah, this is a different world.
Right. Here's the quote. Someone with half your IQ is making 10 times as you because they weren't smart enough to doubt themselves.
That's the one.
There's something in that. New Year's resolution. Be dumber.
Yeah.
It's why we're starting Captive Fun, right, Aaron?
Yeah. Such a good time in the market to do so.
As Jason Calacanis says, too stupid to quit.
Yep.
At the end of the day, there's pros and cons for everything. But that's why when you look at first-time founders who just don't know any better, they often have an energy to pump through because they haven't had the problems. But at the same time, second-time founders have a whole lot of experience that if you can somehow balance both, and that's why I think second-time founders, I would prefer backing in a totally new industry. Because what we need is the naivety about what's going to be hard, but the experience of the stuff that you can carry through. And that's why with Vu, I'm about to release the podcast we did with him at the end of the last year. He's going again, but in defense, and something he says, he knows bugger all about defense. And that's partly why he's excited, because he believes you'll be able to maintain that energy. And I think that's right, because if I was to go back and try and start something in all of the areas that I've had experience in, I can just see myself being too negative, and that's not going to work, or that didn't work last time. And it'd kill it.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for the naivety, but what that manifests into is also first principles thinking. You're not tarnished with all these perceptions of how things are. You just come in with that fresh mind and a blank canvas and approach things in a different way.
It's also why generally corporate innovation fails.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like, it's both mindset and incentives and risk aversion, and
there's plenty of more inputs into why statistically corporate innovation is something that fails the most out of anything. If you put it on a versus startups, I would back corporate innovation fails more, but they know too much, they're not incentivized. But I think the big one is that they don't have a blank canvas, they don't have that raw energy and the raw optimism.
Now, a big one that was talked about online over the Christmas period was a company called Bench Accounting in the US. I think on the 23rd of December, messaged out to all of its people saying, in 2 days we're shutting down, you're not going to have access to your accounts. And benched effectively on online bookkeeping. But what was interesting, they'd raised $100 million and they couldn't make it work. But for me, when I saw that, yes, that's often the pattern. You raise too much money, and raising a lot of money and getting some signals of success sometimes means it's hiding the fact that you don't have product market fit. And the next article will go into an expanded view of product market fit. But again, after raising $100 million to go straight to liquidation and shut down, they would have tried to find a buyer. Like, it's not like we like torching money. Investors will try and get some kind of return. And obviously there was no value seen in it. But I think people like Bench and maybe a few others to go, this is going to be the last of those dinosaurs that raised unbelievable amounts of money before actually getting a real business.
I agree. And it ties back to one of Jack's predictions. But yeah, we see this a lot, right? Like founders go, raising more capital is associated with then having less risk. I think it changes the risks. And we've talked about this a lot, but it changes the emotion of decision making, the assumption that with resources we can't fail. Yeah, I think people anchor off the wrong signals. Potentially, they're not looking at actually the demand metrics. They start looking at these points of validation that investors believe, and we have conviction of them, and therefore, yeah, good lessons.
Now, obviously, they managed to raise a lot of money, but I would argue they didn't have product market fit. Now, there was a post by Ruben D that I thought was quite interesting in that he then takes product market fit and breaks it down into two core areas. One is go-to-market fit. Can you reliably reach your ideal customer and can you consistently close deals? And then two, problem solution fit. Can you deliver value effectively to each customer? Can you keep customers engaged and growing? And when you combine those two things, you end up with product market fit. And I think that's dead right. And I think we often see it breaking down either in both, but one or the other. Like the problem solution fit is very, very good, but they don't have a proper scalable way of actually finding the customers, and therefore the business fails. Or they find a shitload of customers, but then they can't actually keep them with their product. And so I like the way, and it aligns with our sort of go-to-market canvas, where it just breaks down the product market fit is the combination of being able to get find, sell, serve, and retain all humming. Whereas too often product market fit is a bit nebulous for founders and they don't really know it. Whereas if each one of these boxes is 100%, if your find is only 40, that's where you've got the challenge. And if you can't do that at scale, you're always going to have a product market fit problem.
Yeah, I love this. I love how it breaks it down. I remember I presented our canvas somewhere once and someone criticized it. Well, not really criticized it. The question was, why do you have problem and solution on there? But I think it's so critical. You can't separate it from the go-to-market fit. Like these things are interrelated. And I was just more dumbfounded by the question. But I love this for the way it breaks it down. It's exactly in alignment with what we talk about.
I think it's a great visual, and I think this will tie in really well with the VU podcast as well. I know a number of the conversations Jack and I have had with him, he's really touched on both sides of this and how when you are looking at deal flow, and for us, deals in the pipeline, I know most of this is our focus of trying to understand this so that we can know whether we can help them, but also do we think they found it? Are they ready for us? Should they really be looking at seed versus Series A and so forth? So yeah, great visual. And I think the article more broadly has some good insights.
Well, let's round it out with something that hopefully will pump up our tires a little bit, give us as a team a little positivity. The number of active VC firms has dropped 25% since 2021. Now, like I said before, a body in motion tends to stay in motion. We are seeing the great washout. The venture fund world of capital is effectively the same as the venture investing world, in that essentially 30 VC funds raised 75% of all venture capital in the US in 2024. So similar to your returns tend to come from a very small group of companies. The majority of capital has actually flown into a very small number of names. Now, the reason why that is a lot of the big check writers are looking for nominal returns rather than percentage returns. And there's no shortage of data demonstrating that if you're a smaller LP backing smaller funds that have differentiated deal flow, are hungrier than these large funds that are trying to build something, they deliver the best returns. And that's part of our sell.
Yeah, I think for founders that might not understand the fund space that well, like the big institutional fund managers have to deploy large amounts of capital, and the check sizes for the smaller and emerging fund managers and the proportion of the fund size that those checks would be and the fee structure and whatnot, the big institutional funds end up flowing into the much larger funds. And so, yeah, it's no surprise that 75% of the capital goes into a small subset of the fund managers.
Yeah, and something like founders may or may not know is capital leverages. So a small investment team can manage, for example, us 10 mil, but we could easily scale it up to 100 mil with the same team. And it's just being able to demonstrate that you can deploy the capital and then build the trust with these larger institutions. And that's why we see fund or vintage 1, 2, and 3, like it scales exponentially.
Now, a reminder, whether it's a small emerging VC fund or founders, easiest and best capital comes from your existing networks. Now, there's been a whole lot of litigation with Elon in general, and what that means is you have to release messages. And I believe there's been some litigation around the Twitter acquisition, and this seemed a bit too good to be true. So in this case, I've actually validated it. I went and found the deposition documents. I went and found the text messages. I've actually tried to do some DD on this. But these are some messages that were released between Elon and Larry Ellison when Elon was looking to raise money to fund Twitter. Elon Musk, any interest in participating in the Twitter deal? This is sent to Larry. Yes, of course. Thumbs up emoji. Cool. Roughly what dollar size? Not holding you to anything, but the deal is oversubscribed, so I have to reduce and kick out some participants. Always be closing, always be selling. I smell bullshit. But anyway, Larry comes back and says, $1 billion, ... or whatever you recommend. Elon says, whatever works for you. I'd recommend maybe 2 billion or more. This has a very high potential and I'd rather have you than anyone else. Larry comes back, I agree it has huge potential and it would be lots of fun.
Mate, where are they in my world? Let's expand our network here.
It's a very different experience of raising capital.
Anything else on that one?
Look, what's Twitter down now? 75, 80%?
But Larry would have been made whole on Tesla at the moment, plus Starlink. So if you take Elon as a holistic value proposition, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into some charts. I have like literally 4 months worth. So this is only this isn't really a chart, but I just found it funny from Dirk Shamler, who was reposting someone called Daniel from growing_Daniel. Starting a company is awesome. If you want to feel like a piece of shit one day and king of the universe the next day, and just keep alternating back and forth forevermore.
Day or like hourly?
Yeah. Now, annual working hours. So somebody went and plotted the average working hours based on country. Mexico, Costa Rica, and Chile. Not working hours. These are the number of days a year a person is likely to spend more than 8 hours working. So like Mexico is 276, Costa Rica 271, Chile 244. Interestingly, US is 206.
Days in a year?
Yeah, days in a year. Annual working hours where someone is likely to be working more than 8 hours a day. So as you go down, you can just see the countries. Europe, the Europeans, they do fuck all, which I think we already knew. Australia's in the middle, and then you've got more of the South American environments.
How are the Germans? Way down the bottom. I think they've got something worked out.
Too busy saying no.
German in Germany? Like, is this, like, if you're an Australian living in the US, do you go into the US bucket?
Oh, so that's a good question. You have the, what is it called? The migrant's curse. You go to a new country, you tend to work your ass off. Here's a chart of the US equity allocation, percentage US equity. These are flows. If you look at December 24, it's actually going back to 2001, the biggest inflow of the biggest change in inflow since 2001, which I think makes sense. With Donald getting in, just the general euphoria in the market, people are like, yeah, I'm back in. Now, what's interesting, we're technically third year into the bull market. And so this is taking the average return for the third year of a bull market going back to 1950. And it just looks at the average years. The first year on average is 36%. The second year is 15%. It drops in the second year to 2.1% on average. Now, in years 4 and 5, it picks up. But I do think that the market is probably not going to be as strong this year as last year because there was just so much hype in November and December that drove the markets up so much higher. I just wonder if this is going to play out to be true. And certainly the credit markets are not forecasting anything bad on the horizon. Like corporate spreads, even at the high yield level, continue to test the lowest since 2007. Now, what happened in 2008? Anybody remember? Yeah. So now the yield curve, which has previously been pretty good at forecasting issues around the traps, which is effectively where later later duration yields are less than the current day yield. We've just exited the longest yield curve inversion in history. And so what's going to be interesting to see if later in 2025/2026 is when the trouble starts. Because normally after a yield curve, I think the average was somewhere between 12 months and 2 years from the yield curve ending. So we shall see. But what's caught a lot of people off guard is the fact that the yield curve was able to reverse whilst the markets were able to still climb. Just a little reminder of a cycle of investors' emotions. It starts at optimism, which moves into excitement, which moves into greed, which moves into euphoria. And then the next thing from euphoria is, can it continue? The anxiety. And then when markets start to fall, there's denial, but that then leads to fear, desperation, panic, capitulation, despondency, and depression. Now, at the end of depression, we get hope, a bit of relief, and then we return back to optimism. Now, it's interesting to see where we are. Now, this is my life on a fairly short cycle, but
Same here, Dom.
Now, the reason why that's important, or not so much important, is that intelligence. So it would be fair to say that Isaac Newton was pretty bloody intelligent.
Yep.
Can't remember exactly what he invented. Now, here is the South Sea stock, which was like one of the first huge hype bubbles back in 1718 to 1721. And so Newton invests a little bit and then he triples his money and he exits happy. But all of Newton's friends, they start getting rich because it doubles again and then it doubles again. Now, Newton, not wanting to miss out, nearly at the top, he goes in hard and big, only for just a time the whole thing shitting itself. He exits broke and he dies broke. And it's the emotion of FOMO and all of that and the lack of fundamental analysis and all those things that killed it. Now, obviously very smart, but again, that's where smarts don't necessarily correlate to success if you can't keep your emotion under control.
Of course you put this in.
And here's the, people may not be aware, but in the run-up of late October, Fartcoin came out, which Elon pushed a little bit. I think Trump even referred to it maybe. Yeah. This is the market cap of it going from just on 100 million up to $1 billion in a month. So there is still some money floating around the system. Now, this is interesting. So this plots global M2, so that's the money supply on a global basis, right, in trillions of dollars, but then it also plots the Bitcoin price. Now, this was a little bit late in 24, so I haven't updated it, but Bitcoin did have a pullback and I think may have an even further pullback. But a lot of people see things and don't realize how much money supply, how much all these other underlying things drive the markets. And it's the same if you were to plot Australia's house prices, which we've done in a previous episode, with the Australian money supply, it's a one-for-one correlation. When the monetary base expands, asset prices expand. Why? Because it's actually the commercial banks that are the ones that drive a lot of the money supply. So the more loans that are getting done, the more assets are being purchased, the more demand there is. So let's see what happens with the Bitcoiners. If there is a big contraction in global money supply, I'm not so sure that Bitcoin's going to hold up where it is. Now, I do want to just thank Elon again for Starlink, because that's how I'm connecting to you today. But I also share this via Starlink, which brings me a little bit of joy because I'm an asshole. But here's the average price of used Teslas. You can see they spiked just post-COVID, and the average price has dropped from 67,000 down to 30,000. This is in the US, which is why I think it's going to have some challenges. You've got such poor resale relative to others, and you're taking such a haircut. And even Hertz, who remember in COVID bought a shitload of these things and it was trumpeted as a great thing. Hertz, when you hire a Tesla now, they will actually make you an offer to see if you want to buy it for pennies on the dollar.
Yeah, wow.
They just want to get rid of them. And part of the issue is that Hertz, being a hire company, has a lot of non-technical people. And when you jump into a Tesla, it's a little bit different to your normal ICE car in terms of how it runs. And so what happens, they end up sucking a lot more management time. They have a lot more issues out on the road, not to mention some of the quality and the battery issues. So they're getting rid of the whole fleet. Couldn't have happened to a nicer company. And Jack, this is just for you, just to pull on the heartstrings just a little bit, as somebody whose kids are disappearing on them, and Aaron's who's almost disappeared on them. 80% of the time you'll ever spend with your child is over by the time they're 18.
This has been on my mind so much as my son turns 14 in a couple of months. Far out, it goes fast. Got to make the most of it.
They don't want you around. Now, this is a little bit late, but I didn't get it on the Christmas episode. This was a letter that was sent to Santa. Dear Santa, when I was a child, my father cheated on my mother. Later, my parents divorced. Soon after, my mother died in a car accident. My brother and I could only live in my grandma's old house. Grandma's sister was an alcoholic. The whole family lived on my grandma's savings. Grandma recently died. My uncle Andy is barely keeping himself out of jail day to day. My brother left home and won't talk to us anymore. Dad, now 74, has to go out and support the family, and eventually he's going to want me to do the same. Sincerely yours, Prince William. And to end it, stop blaming yourself and others. Learn feng shui and blame the furniture instead.
It's good to be back. I needed the fix of shots.
Is it, Aaron?
Yes. What are we all looking forward to? Oh, wow, deafening silence.
The silence is deafening. If the AI has edited out this pause, make no mistake, there was a pause.
Jack, what are you looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to the plaster getting put in at the house. I've got the boys actually. I can hear them now. They've just rocked up, so hopefully that's done.
Oh,
Right.
11 a.m. Excellent. Adelaide time.
No, they're only meant to start tomorrow, so they're actually early.
Sweet. You said they're putting up plaster? It sounds like they're taking down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is.
Said the wrong team.
Rightly.
Ash, what are you looking forward to?
Hopefully finalizing my trip to India for one of my best friend's wedding in March. So we only need to purchase 7 outfits for the 3 days. So if I come for a pay rise, you know what?
Well, hang on. What is there like a?
There's like a outfit for like the event, then the after party every day. And then one day we need 3 because there's like a day event, a night, and then an after party.
This doesn't sound like a friend. I don't know what category to put this in.
But we did get sent a wardrobe planner. So yeah.
Like a piece of paper or a person?
I did respond to them and saying, can you help with the purchase of them? And they were like, no, but yeah, like it's like a full on PDF of all the different things.
Wow.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
This isn't a movie.
Once in a
It'll still be
lifetime.
good. Have you been there before?
Yeah, I've been to India when I finished college. I had spent a month there, just traveling from friend's house to friend's house. But yeah, I haven't been to this part of India, so it's up in Rajasthan, the state. And so we'll do a little bit of travel through there. But yeah, it's on a tiger safari. They've like hired out this like big hotel, so I'm really excited.
No, that's
See all my
awesome.
friends.
That's good. Good to have something to look forward to like that.
Yeah, that's epic.
Aaron?
Well, so Jack, I sold the ute just before Chrissy. And so I am looking forward to shopping for a motorbike, which is maybe...
Midlife crisis much?
Yeah, this is.
Well, I sold mine, what was that, 18 months ago, 2 years ago, whenever that was, and I miss it desperately. But now I've been told maybe prioritise the second car before the motorbike, so we'll see. We'll see what lands in the driveway.
Yeah, make sure you optimize for sales though.
Yeah. What about you, Don?
I'm getting back into the podcast rhythm. I must admit I was itchy during that period of time. I enjoy the potties. My wife and 2 older kids have just come back from fishing, so it's about to get very noisy in here. And like there was some really great energizing discussions about the fund just before Christmas, and a couple of people who have been listening to the podcast as an example and knew all of us, but then when they learned that we were raising a fund, had a look at the deck, gave some feedback, and then said, okay, put me down for this amount. Like that is a hell of a way to end the year.
Yeah, bloody good. I'm super pumped for getting into the fund now that we're all back.
I think the last year, whilst difficult and hard, we've worked out what we need to do. We've just got to be able to allocate the time. We've got to find those right people and leverage those networks. And we're just seeing some real great deals. And we've got a couple in the pipeline now. That one's a little later stage, but is I think going to be a really great opportunity for us. Yeah, so that's what I'm looking forward to. I'm just looking forward to getting back into the rhythm. And a lot of portfolio support stuff has been lined up. I've been messaging back and forth with a number of them, trying to get some of that squared away. So I really enjoy that bit of the work. And then we've got the missions and the offsites, which we all enjoy as well. So it's going to be a big year. All right.
Awesome.
Let's do it.
Sweet. See you guys.
See you, team.
All right. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.